What's up guys, welcome back to Core CSS Mastery. We're going to be talking about styling lists. Now for the most part, lists are very similar to plain text. Many of the CSS rules we'll use for regular text are also going to work on lists. So for example, we have two lists in this HTML document. We have an unordered list and we have an ordered list. So if we were to create a rule for coloring the text, it would be exactly the same as if we were coloring plain text. So let's target the unordered list. First of all, let's create a simple rule that turns the font of the unordered list red. It's also possible to style the list elements themselves, but that won't necessarily style the entire list. As you can see, our unordered list and ordered list have a short title at the beginning, which is not being turned red. So everything you already know about text is going to work for styling lists. But there are some additional rules we can use specifically for list items in CSS. The first property that we're going to focus on is the list style type. Let's take a quick look at some of the available values. Now this is going to style the bullet points themselves or potentially the numbering system. So remember, the unordered list is going to just have symbols such as bullet points, whereas the ordered list is going to have some sort of numbering system. Now there's actually quite a large amount of different bullet types, so we're not going to mention them all. Let's just try out some common types. For example, disk. Let's see what happens. So we can see everything gets turned into a regular bullet point. Even the numbered list or the ordered list has been turned into regular bullet points. Let's try lower Roman. This is actually going to style the list with Roman numerals. Again, we would normally just use this on the ordered list, not the unordered list, because as you can see, the unordered list has now become an ordered list if we set the list style type to lower Roman. So we'd instead probably do something like this. The ordered list we might target with something like lower Roman, but then the unordered list we'd usually target with a different value. Let's try square, for example, and see what that looks like. So we see our unordered list is styled or bulleted with square bullet points, whereas our ordered list is making use of lowercase Roman numerals. Now, although there are quite a few different bullet point styles to choose from, it could be that we want our very own custom bullet point style for these lists, in which case we can actually provide our own image for use as a bullet point. And we can do this with list style image. And inside the value here, we're actually going to pass a function. It's going to be URL with brackets. And inside the URL, we're going to pass the location of the image that we want to use as a bullet point. So if we just check out our file directory here, we have an image JPEG. You can just see it's a blue triangle. Let's see if we can use that to style our list. So list style image, we're already inside the correct directory, so we just need to reference image.jpg here, and we should see our bullets get changed into that downloaded image. It's probably going to be easiest if we resize this image first. This is not a very wide image we're looking at right now. It's only 20 or 30 pixels wide. So if your image is a few hundred pixels wide, it might make sense to resize it before using it as a list style image. The final property we're going to look at is list style position. Now this is a fairly straightforward property. It only has two values, and those values are outside and inside. Now the best way to demonstrate how this works is to draw a border around our list elements. Now we haven't covered borders yet, so don't worry too much about the syntax. We're going to have a border property, 1 pixel solid. And we'll see our individual list items, which make up our list, will have borders drawn around them. Now, notice the location of the bullet points. In CSS terms, these are referred to as markers. The marker is appearing outside of the border of the list elements. And that's because we've set list style position to outside. If we change list style position to inside, you can see for the ordered list, now those bullet points or markers are appearing inside the list element themselves. Now we haven't styled the unordered list, but we can do that as well. We can see by default, they're appearing outside of the list element. So we set this to inside. we can see our square bullet points are now appearing inside our unordered list. Now, this is a good point to introduce the idea of shorthand properties in CSS. So we have three different properties which help us style lists. We have list style type, list style image, and list style position. CSS offers shorthand properties. These three rules can be combined into one with the list style property. And we can actually just copy all of the values from the previous three rules into this one property here. So we can specify lower Roman, URL is image.jpg, and we can include inside. Now, if I replace those top three rules with this shorthand rule, you'll see that it doesn't make any difference to the page. This is naturally much more convenient when writing CSS rules. That border property is another example of a shorthand CSS property. So really, the full version of this is border width, 1 pixel, and border style, solid. But we've condensed that into a single rule. Now, why did I give you the three individual properties rather than just the shorthand property, since it's easier? My recommendation is to always learn the full properties first. When you're familiar with how the full properties work, then you can make use of the shorthand CSS properties. Jumping straight into using the shorthand properties, it's a little bit more confusing if we're not familiar with what all of the values relate to. So recommended order of operations here is start with the full CSS properties. Once we're familiar with how they work, then we can transition into using the shorthand CSS properties. Now there's more. We're going to have a look at a feature of CSS known as @rules. And we'll see how we can style our bullets even further without needing to use a custom image. To make things super straightforward here, we're going to return to our longhand version of the CSS rules. So let's return to list style type. Let's just set it to something normal for now. So we can see our ordered list is making use of square bullet points at the moment. We'll also just remove the border around the list elements. We don't need that for now. This list style type property takes more than a default set of values. For example, it can make use of a string. For example, we could just pass a string X and we can see it appears as our marker in this case. Now, it doesn't look great. Maybe we want a bit of space. Let's try something like this. So you can see this is a type of custom marker. We've just passed a string to list style type. But further to that, we can actually pass a custom type to list style type. Let's do that right now. Now this custom type is not defined at the moment, so it's not going to do anything. In fact, you can see that that directive is just ignored. CSS is erroring out here, and the way that CSS handles errors is it just ignores them. It doesn't know what custom type is, so it just defaults to this 1, 2, 3, 4 standard ordered list. So let's create our custom type, and we do this by making use of what's known as a CSS @rule. Now it's called an @rule because it's prefixed with the character. @rules are slightly more advanced CSS, and they essentially instruct the CSS on how to behave in certain situations. And we can use an @rule to define a new counter style. So we're going to write @counter-style. We're then going to pass the name of our style, and we've named it custom type. We can then pass some properties and values that help define this custom type. First, we need to pass a system, and we're going to give the value cyclic here. This means that it's going to cycle through the icons that we define. So if we define a set of icons, once it gets to the end, it's going to go back to the beginning. An example of another value we can pass here is fixed. And what fixed will do is once it runs out of icons, it's just going to revert to a default list style at that point. So now we need to define our symbols. So these are the symbols that will be used as the markers or the bullet points. And one of the really cool things about the symbol property here is it can take a Unicode value. So for example, over on the right, we have a site that lists the Unicode images that are available and their corresponding codes. So we could pick an image from here and we could use it as a custom bullet point. So let's find an image that looks good. Some interesting flowers down here. Let's see if we can get this sunflower. So we can see the code here is 1F33B, and we need to put this in inverted commas and start with a backslash. In fact, if we actually click on the image itself, I believe the site will give us more information. So you can see there's a Unicode number there, but there's also a CSS code, and it's telling us it's backslash 1F33B. All right, so with that in place, let's refresh our list. And for some reason, I didn't get the backslash. There we go. And we can see our sunflowers now being used as the marker for this ordered list. Now, keep in mind that symbols will accept a list. So for example, let's take another Unicode or CSS code value if you prefer, and we can see it just cycles through that list. So it takes symbol 1, symbol 2, then it goes back to symbol 1 again. If we were to instead provide the value fixed, what it will do is cycle through the two symbols and then default to the regular list styling. It's also possible to provide other values to the counter style custom type. So we could have a property such as suffix, and maybe this is going to be fairly self-explanatory. We can just pass a suffix here. And now we see that suffix has been appended to our custom bullet points. Now, this particular at rule, I wouldn't consider this basic CSS. If anything, this is actually fairly advanced CSS. So what do we actually care about in terms of core CSS mastery? The main takeaway is very simply this list style type property and some of the default values we can pass to that. So when we're styling our site, we can easily make a decision in terms of, do we want square bullet points, circle bullet points, Roman numerals, Greek numerals? We can make the decision. Everything else you've seen in this session is extras. You can use them if you want your own custom images, but the most important thing here is just be aware of how that list style type property works and some of the basic values you can use for that. All right, thanks very much for watching. See you in the next part of this course.